An 8-foot alien queen looked down on him. Now she's carrying his baby. Ayla woke up on a cold stone floor. His hands were tied behind his back with glowing metal cuffs. His head hurt, his vision was blurry, and the air smelled like burning. Flowers. He tried to move, but his body was weak. The last thing he remembered was the battle fire, smoke, and alien weapons flying across the sky. Now he was here, wherever here was. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. "Bring the human forward." 2 guards grabbed Eli's arms and pulled him up. They were tall, scaly creatures with armor that shimmered like glass. He didn't fight, not because he was afraid, but because he couldn't even stand on his own. His legs barely worked. As they dragged him into a wide, glowing room, at the center stood a throne, and on that throne sat someone. Massive, she was over 8 feet tall. Her skin was lavender blue and shimmered like moonlight. Long silver hair fell over her armored shoulders. Her golden eyes glowed softly in the shadows. She wore a crown that looked like living crystal. This was no ordinary alien. This was a queen. The room fell silent as Ellie was thrown to the floor in front of her. He looked up slowly, his heart pounding. The queen stood from her throne and stepped closer. Each step echoed like thunder across the chamber. She stopped just a foot away from him, looking down with sharp eyes. Then she spoke in a low, smooth voice. "So this is the human." Eli stayed quiet, unsure what to say. He didn't want to speak and make things worse. One of the guards whispered to the queen, "He's the one who survived the blast zone, Your Majesty." She narrowed her eyes. "He survived the plasma fire, alone?" The guard nodded. "Yes, my queen." He pulled 3 of his own from the wreckage before collapsing. The queen stared at Eli for a long moment, then slowly walked around him. Eli could feel her energy, powerful and strange. It wasn't just her size that made her feel dangerous. It was something deeper, something ancient. She stopped behind him and said, "You should be dead." Eli looked over his shoulder and replied softly, "Yeah, I get that a lot." A few gasps filled the room. No one spoke to the queen like that. But instead of being angry, the queen smiled, just a little. She walked back in front of him, crouched down, and studied his face. "You are not like the others," she said. "You are not afraid of me. I'm too tired to be afraid." Eli said, forcing a smile. He didn't know why he was still talking. Maybe it was the pain. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe, deep down, he wanted to live. The queen stood again, tall and proud. "Take him to the trial chamber," she said. Her voice calm but cold. "He must face the right." Eli frowned. "What right?" She looked down at him, her eyes glowing brighter. "The right that will decide your fate," she said. "Or perhaps all of ours." The guards pulled Eli to his feet. He looked back at the queen as they dragged him away, but she was already turning back to her throne. Whispers filled the room, soft and afraid. "She's really going to do it," one said. "She's going to test the human," said another. No one had ever seen the queen act this way before. She had never let an outsider stand in her presence without punishment. But today was different. As the doors slammed shut behind Eli, the queen touched her stomach gently. Her hand glowed for a moment, and a strange look crossed her face. Fear and hope. Outside the chamber, the stars of Varaxa shined bright in the sky. But inside the palace, something ancient had awakened, and the entire empire would soon feel the change. The walls of the trial chamber pulsed with a dim blue light, as if the entire room was alive and watching. Eli stood in the center, his wrists still locked in those strange glowing cuffs. Alien guards formed a wide circle around him, all silent, all waiting. He glanced up, chest rising and falling fast. His injuries from the crash were still fresh, and his legs trembled under the weight of exhaustion. And yet, the fear that gripped him wasn't from the guards or the room. It was from the massive gate on the far side, chained and sealed. Something was behind it. And whatever it was, the entire room seemed afraid of it. A voice echoed through the chamber, calm and powerful. It was the queen. She now stood above in a high glass balcony, looking down at him like a judge. "Human Eli," she said, her voice steady, "you are to face the trial of bond. The beast behind the gate was created long ago to test compatibility." Eli frowned, blood still drying at the corner of his mouth. "What kind of compatibility?" he asked loudly. She didn't answer, just gave a small nod. The chains on the gate began to move, one by one, clanking and falling to the floor like dead snakes. The guards tightened their stance. Even though they were not the ones facing the creature, Eli backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the shadows creeping out from the gate. Then, with a loud hiss, it opened. Out stepped a creature unlike anything Eli had ever seen. Its skin was black and slick, like oil, but it shimmered in the light. Its 6 legs moved with strange grace, and its eyes were yellow and glowing. It didn't roar, didn't charge, just stared at him with curious hunger. Eli swallowed hard, whispering to himself, "You've got to be kidding me." There were no weapons in the room, no tools, nothing he could use. All he had were his hands, his feet, and a dying body that was running out of strength. The creature moved fast, suddenly leaping forward with a sound like breaking glass. Ele rolled to the side just in time, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through his ribs, but he got back up, barely. The creature circled him again, slower this time, almost testing him. He didn't know what it wanted, but he knew one thing. If he gave up now, he was dead, and not just dead, but turned into a message, a warning, a failure. He picked up a loose piece of broken chain from the floor and wrapped it around his fist. The creature lunged again, this time swiping with a claw that tore through the air. Eli ducked and slammed his fist into the beast's side. The chain sparked against its skin, leaving a bright streak of blue. The creature shrieked and jumped back, surprised. It paced, unsure now, as if Eli was not what it expected. Up in the balcony, the queen leaned forward, her hand pressed over her heart. Her breathing had changed, and a soft glow appeared under her skin. Her eyes never left the human. Back below, Eli stood bleeding, panting, the chain in his hand slipping with sweat. But his stance was different now. He was no longer afraid. He had faced worse, and deep down, something told him this wasn't just a test of strength. The creature lunged again, but this time Eli didn't attack. He dodged, spun behind it, and wrapped the chain around its neck, not to choke, but to hold. He whispered something, a low, calming voice. The creature stopped, confused, growling. Then, to everyone's shock, it dropped to the floor, its head bowed low. A silence spread across the room, thick and deep. The queen stood, her voice trembling now. "He passed," she whispered, as if saying it too loudly. Would break something important. Guards moved in, but not to attack. They carefully approached Eli, removed his cuffs, and bowed their heads. Eli looked up at the queen, confused. "What the hell was that?" he asked. Her reply came slow and full of weight. "You did not defeat the beast with violence," she said. "You made it choose you." Eli shook his head, wiping blood from his lip. "What does that mean?" The queen's golden eyes glowed brighter. "It means the prophecy is true," she said softly. "And now, I have no choice but to complete the bond." Before Eli could ask anything else, the guards began to lead him out, but his mind was spinning. What prophecy? What bond? And why did the queen look so emotional? Outside, the stars of Varaxa burned even brighter than before, and far above, in the queen's chambers, something within her began to glow, a life that hadn't existed yesterday, a life that now grew inside her, because of the human who should have died, but didn't. The chamber Eli was brought to didn't look like part of the palace. It was older, colder, and covered in glowing roots that moved slightly, like they were breathing. The air felt heavy, like something ancient was watching from the shadows. He was shirtless now, his chest wrapped in soft blue cloth and marked with strange golden symbols. The guards didn't speak to him. They bowed their heads and left him alone in the center of a wide stone circle. Above him, the ceiling opened to the stars, Strange music echoed softly from somewhere deep underground. Slow and haunting, Eli looked up at the sky, confused and exhausted. He didn't understand what was happening, but he had learned one thing already. Nothing here followed human rules. A door slid open behind him with a smooth hum. He turned quickly, eyes narrowing. The queen walked in alone, wearing a robe made of silver threads that shimmered like water. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and her eyes locked onto his. There was no crown, no guards, no throne, just her. Eli stepped back a little, unsure. "What is this place?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward him and placed something in his hand. It was a thin crystal shard, warm to the touch and pulsing with light. He looked down at it, confused. "It's your half," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "My half is already inside me." His brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" The queen placed her hand over his heart, right where the golden mark had been drawn. "This room listens," she said. "It remembers. It connects blood, mind, and fate." He looked around, breathing harder. "Wait, what do you mean inside you? Are you saying—" She nodded slowly. "I carry your seed, human." Eli's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He hadn't touched her, hadn't even been near her long enough for something like that. It didn't make sense. It was the bond trial, she explained, reading his thoughts. "You passed it not by power, but by intention. The ritual recognized it. And now life has begun." His head spun. He turned away, staring at the stars through the open ceiling. All this in just 2 days? A war, a capture, a queen, and now a child? "You didn't ask for this," she said quietly behind him. "And I didn't plan for it. But the old magic runs deeper than our laws." He didn't reply. He didn't know what to say. But then, something strange happened. The crystal in his hand pulsed brightly, and the golden mark on his chest began to glow in answer. At the same moment, the queen's stomach gave off a soft blue light. The room suddenly filled with warmth, and the floor lit up with patterns under their feet. Circles of light rose around them like rings of ancient memory. It felt like the universe had paused to watch. The queen stepped closer and reached for his hand. "Once we complete this rite, you will not be just a father," she said. "You will be bound to me, body and spirit, through the child and through the bond." Eli pulled his hand away for a second, overwhelmed. But then he saw something in her eyes. Not power, not control, but fear. She was afraid too. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why a human?" The queen's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached down and placed his hand over her belly. Beneath his fingers, something moved. A spark, a flutter like a heartbeat. Tears filled her golden eyes. "I don't know," she said. "But whatever this is, it's alive now, and I can't do this alone." Eli stood frozen, heart pounding. He hadn't signed up for this, hadn't chosen any of it. But something inside him, deep, old, and human, felt it too. That tiny heartbeat, that warmth, that impossible connection, without a word. He closed his hand around the glowing crystal. The light flared, and the chamber responded. Ancient voices whispered from the walls. Stars shimmered brighter above. And both of them, human and alien, were wrapped in a circle of soft light. The bond was sealed, not with words, not with ceremony, but with understanding. Somewhere far away, in the heart of the empire, an old machine lit up for the first time in centuries. It sent a signal into space, a soft sound like a lullaby. Something had changed, something had begun. The sky above the palace turned green with warning lights. Silent sirens pulsed across the royal towers. But down below, in the queen's private chamber, she stood beside Eli, staring at the door in silence. She didn't look afraid, not exactly. But something in her shoulders had changed. He could see it, the tension, the weight pressing down on her. "What's happening?" Eli asked, his voice low. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached up and pulled a silver chain from her neck. At the end was a glowing crystal key. "They know," she whispered finally. The nobles, the High Council, they know about you and the child. Eli's heart skipped. He hadn't even had time to understand all this himself. Now they were already coming for them. The queen moved quickly. Placing the key into a panel behind the bed, a hidden wall slid open, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by blue fireflies. You need to leave this place, she said. Now. Eli stepped back, shaking his head. Not without you. She looked at him, her golden eyes softer than ever. I am the queen, Eli, she said. I cannot run. But he didn't care about her crown. He had seen the way she had touched her stomach the night before. He had felt the way her hands trembled, just for a second. If they come for the child, they'll come through you first, he said. Let's go. Now together, a sharp bang echoed down the hallway outside. The guards had begun to breach the inner chamber. The queen hesitated, but then grabbed his hand, and together they stepped into the tunnel. The door sealed behind them, swallowing the room in silence once more. They moved fast through the narrow path, their shadows dancing along the damp stone walls. The queen's long legs moved smoothly, but Eli noticed her steps getting slower. She was strong, but the pregnancy was already changing her body. She placed a hand on the side of the tunnel to steady herself. Are you okay? He asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She nodded once. The bond is growing, she whispered. It pulls energy from both of us. More footsteps echoed behind them now, fast and angry. The queen touched the wall beside her, and a second tunnel split off from the first. She turned into it without hesitation. The path opened into a small cavern lit by glowing plants and strange roots. In the center was an old transport pod, dusty, hidden, forgotten. This was once used to smuggle royal children during uprisings, she said. Now it's our only way out. They climbed inside, and with a soft hum, the pod began to sink. Below the ground, for a moment, everything was quiet. Then, above them, the ceiling shook with explosions. The chamber was being breached. The queen sat across from Eli in the small pod, her breathing uneven. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes never left his. I never thought I would run from my own people, she said. I ruled them with fire. And now they hunt me like prey. Eli reached across and took her hand. You're not running, he said. You're protecting something bigger now. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, a tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The pod came to a stop far below the palace, opening into a dark, wide cave. Waiting there was an old alien dressed in simple clothes, his skin wrinkled like dried bark. He bowed low to the queen. Your Majesty, you are welcome among the forgotten. The queen nodded slowly. This is Eli, she said, and the child he gave me. The old alien's eyes widened, but he said nothing, only stepped aside and motioned for them to follow. They were led to a hidden sanctuary deep beneath the capital, where light came from stone and life grew without sun. Dozens of beings from different alien races looked up as they entered. All of them were exiles, outcasts, those rejected by the empire long ago. Now they had a queen among them. Eli stood by her side as she addressed them for the first time. My people have cast me out, she said, because I carry something new, something they fear. She placed her hand on her belly. But this life will not be hidden forever, she said. This child is not just mine, and not just his. It belongs to what comes next. The room remained silent, but slowly heads began to nod. The outcasts believed her, not because she was queen, but because she was honest. They saw the glow in her, the strength in her voice, and the human beside her who never let go of her hand. The stars above the empire still shined bright, but far below, in the forgotten caves, a future had just begun, one that would rise, not with power, but with the bond between species no one believed could exist. And the queen, once feared and worshipped, now stood as something even more dangerous, a mother with something to protect, and a human who would never leave her side. The walls of the underground sanctuary pulsed gently with soft light. Like they were breathing with her. Vathira sat still on a stone bench, her robe draped around her growing form. Her eyes were half closed, her hands folded over her belly. She had never felt this way before, heavy, warm, full, and strangely at peace. But peace was not made to last, not for a queen in exile, and not for a child whose very blood broke centuries of law. Ailey walked into the chamber carrying a cloth-wrapped bowl. It was soup, made from roots and glowing mushrooms. He had helped prepare it himself with the strange old man who never stopped smiling. He knelt beside her and held it out. "I think you'll like this one," he said. "It doesn't taste like dirt." She opened her eyes and gave a small laugh. The sound was soft, rare, and honest. She took the bowl and sipped slowly, the heat calming her from the inside. Then she looked at him and said, "You were not made for this world, and yet you belong here." He sat down beside her, tired but smiling. "I think I belong with you," he said. She looked away, her fingers tightening on the bowl. "There are days I wonder if this child will be safe. Even in my arms," she whispered. "They fear us now, even more than before." Eli didn't speak. Instead, he reached over and touched her stomach gently. The glow beneath her skin flickered at his touch, and she let out a slow breath. "He feels you," she said softly. "He knows you're here." They stayed like that for a while, just breathing together. But then a sound snapped them back, fast footsteps, rushed whispers, a cry of warning. The queen stood quickly, her instincts kicking in. Eli helped her steady herself, his eyes already searching for danger. One of the guards ran in, gasping. "We've been found. Trackers are closing in from the southern ridge." The words dropped like stones in the room. Vathira straightened her spine and placed her bowl aside. "I will not run again," she said calmly. Eli was already grabbing supplies, wrapping belts around his waist and checking for weapons. He turned to her. "Then we protect this place." But before he could finish arming himself, a sharp noise cracked through the cave-like bones snapping. The wall burst inward, throwing dust and glowing roots into the air. From the smoke stepped tall armored figures, royal enforcers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their weapons were drawn, aimed straight at her belly. The queen stood her ground, her hands glowing with energy. "You would attack the future of your own people?" she asked coldly. The lead enforcer raised his blaster without hesitation. Eli moved. Fast, too fast for them to react. He threw himself between the blaster and the queen, taking the full hit across his shoulder. The blast sent him to the ground. With a shout of pain, Vathira screamed, a sound like thunder, and raised her hands. Energy exploded from her body in a ring of light. The guards were thrown back like leaves in a storm, their armor cracked and burning. She ran to Eli, her hands already glowing, pressing against his wound. Blood was pouring from his arm, and his eyes blinked hard, trying to stay awake. "I'm fine," he lied. "You're not," she whispered. "But you protected me." He winced and smiled. "That's the job, right?" Human reflex. More guards were approaching now, heavy footsteps echoing through the caves. The people of the sanctuary gathered behind the queen. Unsure, afraid, she stood tall, her injured mate beside her, her unborn child glowing within. Then she turned to the people and raised her voice. "This ends now," she said. "They will keep coming, unless we show them something greater than fear." She walked forward alone, her back straight, her power shining in every step. The guards hesitated, unsure what to do. They had expected a queen hiding in shadows, not walking into their guns. "I carry a life that is half of me, and half of what you call the enemy," she said. "But if you fire now, you destroy the one thing that could bring peace to all our worlds." One of the guards lowered his weapon, then another, until the entire line stood frozen, caught between duty and something greater. Behind her, Eli stood slowly, one arm pressed to his wound. He stared at her, this tall, glowing alien woman who once ruled 1,000 cities, now fighting for a child and for the man who gave it to her without ever touching her crown. The cave fell quiet again, and in that silence, the child inside her pulsed with light seen by All felt by all. It was not just a child anymore. It was proof. Proof that something new had begun. Rain fell on the capital city for the first time in weeks. Not the usual acid mist or artificial spray from cloud towers. This was real rain. Cool, cleansing, and falling as if the planet itself had taken a long breath. But inside the royal citadel, tension burned hotter than ever. The great doors of the throne hall creaked open. All eyes turned as the exiled queen stepped inside. She wore no crown, no armor. Only a plain robe soaked at the hem with cave dust and blood. One hand rested on her stomach, glowing with soft blue light. The other gripped a human's hand, steady and firm. Eli walked beside her, his wounded shoulder wrapped in bandage and metal mesh. He didn't flinch under the stares. The nobles on each side of the throne room murmured in disbelief. Guards stiffened. Priests looked down in shame. No one had expected her to return, especially not like this. But Vathira didn't bow, didn't stop. She walked straight down the center of the hall and stood at the foot of the throne. Then she looked up at the high chair where the new regent sat, a cousin drunk on fear and power. "I am not here to beg," she said, her voice calm and cold. "I am here to remind you what the old blood once promised." The regent rose slowly, his gold-lined cloak dragging on the floor. "You broke sacred law," he hissed. "You carry an abomination." At those words, Eli stepped forward, his jaw tight, but the queen touched his hand gently. Stopping him, she turned her golden gaze back to the regent. "Then let the people decide what is sacred," she said. Her voice echoed through the chamber. Not by volume, but by weight. She pulled back her robe, revealing the full glow beneath her skin. The mark of the bond shimmered from her belly to her chest. A connection alive, undeniable. Gasps filled the hall, even from those who had hated her. No one had seen a royal birth sign glow like that in over 200 years. Eli stepped beside her again. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. He simply placed his hand over the light and let it answer. The glow grew warmer, brighter, a symbol not just of survival, but of change. The regent's face paled. He turned to the high priest, desperate for control. "Tell them. Say it's forbidden." But the priest, ancient and hunched, shook his head slowly. "The old text spoke of the bond rebirth," he whispered. "They never said it had to be one of our kind." The silence that followed was heavy until a small voice broke it. From the back of the hall, a child stepped forward. "Is the baby part human?" she asked innocently. Vathira knelt and nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "And part me." The girl smiled and said, "Then maybe it will be both brave and kind." A strange laugh echoed from the nobles, soft and unsure, but it was real. And in that tiny moment, the walls cracked, not the stone ones, but the ones built by fear. The queen rose, her hand never leaving her stomach. "I will not fight for the throne," she said. "I will not spill blood to be heard, but I will raise this child here, in the heart of this world, and you will watch what becomes of him." Eli finally spoke, voice low but steady. "If you try to harm her again, I won't be as patient." The regent said nothing. He sat back down in his golden chair, suddenly very small. He had all the power in law, but none in truth. And the truth stood before him, tall, glowing, and pregnant with the future. The guards didn't stop them as they turned to leave. The nobles didn't speak as they walked past. But something had shifted. The queen was no longer in exile. She didn't need a crown to rule. She had something stronger. In the days that followed, people gathered outside the palace, not to protest but to listen. They lit candles, drew symbols in the dirt, and whispered stories about a queen who chose love over law, about a child who had already changed everything before being born. And somewhere within the palace walls, Eli sat beside Vathira on a simple bench. He placed his ear against her belly and smiled. "She kicked," he whispered. "She?" The queen blinked, surprised. He grinned. "Just a guess." Vathira leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't care if it's a queen or a king," she said. "I just wanted to know we never gave up on it." Snow began to fall over the royal gardens. Not the sharp synthetic kind from sky machines, but real snow, soft, quiet, and slow. The people had gathered outside the palace walls, waiting in silence, breath turning white in the cold air. They didn't chant, they didn't shout, they just waited, eyes on the glowing tower. Inside, the queen lay still, her skin glistening with sweat. Her robes had been removed, her crown forgotten in the corner. This was not a royal moment, it was raw, shaking, and real. Eli held her hand, his fingers tight around hers. She squeezed back with strength that surprised him. "You're doing great," he whispered. Brushing hair from her face, she didn't answer, just breathed deep through clenched teeth. The old healer beside her whispered prayers in a forgotten tongue. Blue light pulsed from the queen's body, moving in waves. It was almost time. All across the capital, the lights dimmed, not from failure but from intention. The city was listening. Every tower, every home, every streetlight. They waited with her, outside the palace. Nobles and workers stood side by side for the first time. No one cared about rank tonight. They only cared about what would come next. And finally, it happened. A sound, soft and high, filled the chamber. A cry, not angry, not afraid, but clear and strong. Eli blinked fast as the healer raised the tiny form and laid it in the queen's arms. She was shaking but smiling. Her lips trembled as she looked down at the baby wrapped in soft crystal cloth. Its skin shimmered between colors, changing with each breath, but its eyes, those were gold, pure and bright, just like hers. "It's a girl," the healer said gently. Vathira laughed, weak but joyful. "I knew it," she whispered. Eli leaned in, his hand brushing the tiny fingers. They curled around his, impossibly small and warm. The baby let out another cry, then calmed. At the sound of her mother's heartbeat, "She's perfect," Eli said, voice breaking. "She's powerful," the queen added softly. "And she is ours," word spread fast. The guards outside lit the signal torches. From tower to tower, flame passed across the skyline like a heartbeat. People began to cheer, not wild, not loud, but deep, like something sacred had arrived. In the days that followed, the palace became a place of stories. Priests arrived with old books they thought had no meaning. Children drew pictures of a human and a queen holding hands. Even the coldest nobles, once filled with hate, stood in line to catch a glimpse of the child. Not out of duty, but wonder, they named her Celia, a word that meant between stars. In the old language, she was born of two worlds, and both worlds now bent to meet her. Eli watched as Vathira stood again for the first time after the birth. Her back straight, her child in her arms. She no longer looked like a queen, she looked like something more. A force that couldn't be denied. Together, they stepped out onto the high balcony. The city below roared not with fear, not with orders, but with hope. Thousands of voices chanted her name. "Celia, Celia, Celia." Eli looked out at the crowd and smiled. A month ago, they had chased him with weapons. Now they held candles for his daughter. The queen turned to him and said, "You changed everything." He shook his head. "No," he said, "you just let me stand beside you." As night fell, the baby stirred. Her eyes opened wide, and for the first time, a glow rose from her tiny body. Golden light filled the balcony, touching everyone who stood near. It wasn't just energy, it was peace, and the entire world felt it. That night, there were no more talks of exile, no more whispers of law or bloodlines, just one truth remained, spoken by every voice in every corner of the empire. The queen's child had arrived, and the future had finally begun.